Wicked stuff. Well, afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
How
Hello.
you how you all doing?
Very well, thanks.
Just just about alive.
About like, I bet Camel's had a lovely sleep, haven't you?
No chance. I'm a terrible sleeper as it goes.
Oh
I go
yeah.
to bed early. Yeah, I try to go to bed as early as possible. I try to get up nice and early as well. But my whole life, I wake up multiple times in the night. I've always been a bad sleeper, but somehow I don't feel tired. I got loads of energy, so it's okay. I get away with it.
Oh, wicked. Cool beans. Well, welcome to today's episode. This is the first one officially for the What podcast, Way Out There podcast. So yeah, it's really exciting. Bit of a milestone. And of course, this is probably part eight of two Swigs and a Sig, featuring the mighty Cobra stacker and the mighty Camel Finance. So I'm going to kick it off, mate, with how's things? How are you finding things, Cobra? All good?
Yeah, I can't moan. The volatility of gold at the moment has been a real pressure on me.
Mhm.
But apart from that, everything's good. But yeah, it's up and down like a yo-yo. Well, down really, like a yo-yo.
Yeah, definitely. And what about with you, Camel?
Yeah, I think everything's good with on my end, but I think that weekly cycle was topped for gold, which means we're probably not going to find a major low until, let's say, mid to late July. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's just going down, significantly in terms of dollar or pound value. But I do think we've probably got a few weeks of waiting for before we can see a bounce.
Cool,
Mm.
cool. But generally, you're both okay.
Yes.
Brilliant,
Yeah.
brilliant, brilliant. Right, okay. I'm going to kick this week's or this episode's version off with a quite open question, and that is there an economic deep state controlling everything? I'll hand that over to you, Camel, to take it where you want to take it, brother.
How does one answer this question?
I know,
Um,
mate. I know.
I guess there is. I suspect there is. Um, I reckon it's probably the central banks that are in charge and everyone else is at their mercy. We could potentially argue there are some families that control the central banks. I don't 100% know what the structure is. Um, but yeah, I do think the central banks have more power than the governments do.
I think the higher up the hierarchy we go, the more knowledge they have of what's going on, and they control it. So by faking certain figures like employment figures and this and that and M2 rates like you talk about, then they control what's going to happen with everything else. And the narrative that they put out there keeps us, I don't know, subdued in some ways.
Yeah.
Well, guys, how deep do you think this is? Has it always been the case? Has it just evolved over time with technology? Even if there are sort of, I'm a little bit of a believer in if we look at central banks, what's that? What's that terminology? Are the central banks the fathers that started, like the families that started the banks right at the beginning, and are they still around, but in a different way? What do you reckon?
I reckon they're still there.
Yeah.
I reckon they've probably got more power and more money than they've ever had before.
Okay.
That would be my guess.
Yeah, I agree with that. The families are definitely still there. I think, I don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong in the way I'm thinking here, but when you look at, say, America, everything revolves around the dollar in America and all that. So we say the central banks, but then we look at what's going on in the rest of the world, and there's always talk about Saudi Arabia and China and stuff like that. So are they trying to break away from the controlling system that's been going on? And is most of the control within America or the way they use finance? Obviously, we all deal in the dollar, but you've seen Saudi Arabia pulling away from the petrodollar now and using a lot more rubles, trading in rubles. You've seen China now in April not buying any gold at all, which could have had a slight effect on the gold price that we're seeing now. But these other countries, like the BRICS nations as well, are trying to pull away from something. So what is it they're pulling away from?
I think largely they're all they're all kind of aiming at the same thing. I think, largely speaking, they all want a one world government, a one world taxation, a one world money, and a one world law. I think that's largely what they're all aiming at. But I would imagine there's some argy-bargy between the families and between the countries to try to get a leg up on the other ones, right? So I'd imagine there's some sort of I'm pretty sure their end goal is in alignment, but like I said, I reckon there probably is some intra competition between them at the same time.
Can I
How
ask?
would we? Sorry.
Sorry, Cobra. Could I just jump in on that bit?
Yeah, yeah.
Because when I listen to those sort of not questions, but not even statements, but those thoughts, I often sit there and think it's so reminiscent of what I watch in a mafia film.
Yeah.
You know, with the different families. Sometimes they fall out, but they're all trying to sort of work together in a way as long as we're all getting what they need out of it. And I really see a really similar thing possibly happening with these massive banking families. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think with the massive banking central banks and all that lot of the Western world, yeah, I can see them trying to align to something. To get one world government or one world banking system, the way humans are and humanity is, I don't know if we can do it. I mean, we're always at odds with the socialist countries or the communist countries, and we're always fighting against the Islamic states or Russia or this or that. There's always something going. How are we going to align to have one world government? Who's in charge of it? Who has more power? And they'll try and say, yeah, we're going to evenly do it. But will that ever really happen?
I don't know if they'll be able to pull it off, but I do think that's probably what they're aiming at. And when you say that sort of thing, it makes me think that there's probably some resistance at every level along the way. And then it probably ultimately comes down to those, is it the 13 families that control everything? They're probably doing the whole pulling the puppet strings, trying to orchestrate and force their will on the rest of the world. And I think all of this sort of, you could call it infighting, or maybe you could call it defense that we're seeing, like you were saying, with places moving off of the dollar and the whole BRICS currency system and all of this. I think there's going to be resistance along the way, but then the question becomes, can they stay out of the way of the powers that be, so to speak? Can they stay free from the control of this whole idea of having a one world government, a one world tax, a one world money, and a one world law? So I don't know if they can pull it off, but that seems to be what they're working towards, I think. And
All
like
right,
I
well,
said,
look
there's
at
probably
I was going to say, look at a smaller version of that, even with Europe and what they tried to do, or what they have still got with the European Union. You tried to bring a few countries together, and then you had countries which were poorer and countries which were richer, and the richest had to subsidize the poorer countries. We'll put that now in a world case scenario where you've got extremely poor countries and extremely rich countries. Are the really rich countries going to want to subsidize the other ones? And they have to if it's going to be one world government.
well,
Yeah, go on.
sorry, they kind of already do, right? I mean, this is what the IMF does. You said about CPM, they kind of function like a mafia. The IMF is the financial mafia, and they go into these smaller countries that are really suffering, and they say to them, oh well, we'll write you a check, right, we'll bail you out, but that check always comes with a lot of strings.
Of
And
course.
so they kind of have this choice of, do we say no and then go bankrupt, or do we take the bailout but then end up in the pocket of this cartel, this mafia, the IMF or whatever? And there's a documentary called something like, I forget the name of it, something like The Financial Hitman or something, where they show they literally put people from these more developed countries into the countries that are struggling economically, and they get them to orchestrate a financial collapse from within so that they have no other choice. And it literally is how a mafia would work, go into a neighboring or competitive business and essentially threaten it with bankruptcy and then say, well, we'll bail you out, but you have to submit to our will and our rules. So we're already seeing this on a smaller scale. So I think what we'll probably see is them just scale that up to a global level, or at least try to. Again, the question remains, can they pull it off?
Yeah,
But
but we've seen it with America, with the CIA and all that lot. They've gone into countries, they've as you say, caused havoc, overthrown a country, and basically put a puppet master in there to run the country so it benefits America. Now, the point is, yes, that can be done, and it is already being done, and it can be done on a larger scale if we went to one government. But you would get revolutions again on a larger scale, which would be war, to what we have on a smaller scale in the civil community. Do you know what I mean? So people will rebel against that. So this is where I find it hard that, you know, our country, you know, if they're forced to do something against their will, eventually they will rebel.
Yeah, I certainly like to think so. I certainly like to think that there'll be some resistance to this, but that's to be determined, I guess. I also think they're playing a very, very long-term game. They've probably been doing this already for multiple decades, and it's probably not going to conclude for another decade or two more. But we're going to find out, right? What a wild time to be alive, as I always say.
Yeah, that's for sure. And just on if we look at the banking families, it's just what your thoughts are on this. Trying to fight out, do whatever they're doing, and if there is a possibility of a one world government, possibly down the line, how do you think that government? Where does that government come from? Have you ever thought about that?
Well, this is the point, isn't it? Really, it's even when you try and get a few countries together, you always have one country sort of leading it, and the rest of the puppets all have to follow in suit. And I think one world government. I mean, are you going to have a member of every country sitting in that parliament, in that government? And then who has more say? And who's the leader of it? Like, let's say, for instance, if we just work it out to Britain's politics, and you have Westminster and all that lot, and you've got all the party leaders sitting there, and then you've got one prime minister. Well, who will be in charge, and from what country will that person be? I just see too many issues with it. I can't see it working.
Here's a thought, though. Don't we already kind of have this system via the WEF, the World Economic Forum? Don't we already kind of have this? Because our prime minister, for example, deeply linked, right? His father-in-law, his wife's husband, no, sorry, his wife's father owns the company that's working on the digital ID system. And you can pretty much do this with Macron, you could do this with pretty much any of the current presidents or prime ministers. And they've all got a page on the WEF. They've all submitted to the will of the WEF. And you even got that clip, which is pretty famous, of Klaus Schwab saying, we penetrate the cabinets and install their own guys in these, you know, so-called leadership positions. So I don't think it's a big stretch from where we are. I think, largely speaking, most of the world leaders are not actually leading. They're more like installations from the WEF, right? Puppets. They're just there to do what they're told and to conform to the will of the WEF.
But then it's not a world government as such, is it? It's one leading country, and that's what I'm talking about. The rest are just in there because they have to be in there, or if they're not in there, they're going to suffer in some way.
Yeah, and the scariest part of all of this is who elected the WEF to make the decisions. All our leaders, right?
yeah, for sure.
So I don't know. It's a tough question, CPM, especially for the first one. No warm up.
Sorry.
I think
no dinner, no movie, just straight into it.
I think it's a long way off, and I think the only way we'll see one government for the world is when we get attacked by aliens, because that's when everyone's going to have to come together to bloody save ourselves from that. Otherwise, I don't see humanity getting on with each other.
Yeah, I've heard there's going to be a fake alien invasion in 2033. You know, I've heard this.
Where did you hear that?
I can't remember, but I've seen it multiple times from different vantage points and different places on the internet. And the theory is that they use 9/11 as a template. So apparently during the 9/11, we saw America come together in a way that we've never seen in history, right? And they united under a common threat, under a common enemy. And so the idea is that if you scale this up to a global, a planetary level, and we've got a perceived threat from aliens, then the idea is you could potentially unite. yeah, you could potentially unite the world under a common threat. Whether or not there's any merit to that, I don't know. By no means am I saying, prepare for the fake alien invasion, but I have seen plenty of stuff on it, and it doesn't sound like these days nothing is too crazy, right?
Well, look what AI can do with film and everything now. You
I,
don't know
I,
what you're
I, I,
watching.
bloody
No, I'm
hell.
just saying though. Like I know, but I'm just saying you don't know what you're watching and what you're seeing, so you'll never know if it's fake or real.
No, and we're
Oh,
probably not long away from that being indistinguishable as well. Already, sometimes I see things and I say I'm not 100% sure whether that's AI or not. But in
Yeah.
a couple of years, we're not going to be able to tell.
right, guys, calm down a little bit because Camel, you just said to me, jump in at the deep end, and you've like brought in aliens already. It's just
Aliens is the
quite
biggest psyop of all.
absolutely. But it's interesting though, isn't it? It's a really interesting because all of these things that you mentioned that you read about that everyone just says, "Oh, crikey, it's just a conspiracy and that." But if you sort of really bang it down to logic, and the way I look at it is, if you put yourself in their shoes, whoever shoes that is, and how do you want to create whatever you want to create and get the populace, the peasants to, you know, behave themselves, then you can see real logic in it all. You really can.
Yeah, like I said, nothing is too wild these days, right?
Mm,
Like anything and everything is on the table, no matter how crazy it sounds. Things always sound too crazy, and then it turns out it's true. So who
yeah.
knows?
So go on, I'll very quickly, as you brought the aliens in, I'll very quickly wrap that up. Would you see that as a feasibility?
What, a fake alien invasion?
Yeah,
I won't rule it out. I'll never discount it. I'm not calling for it. It's not a prediction of mine,
yeah.
but I wouldn't discount it.
Come on, between you and Cobra, I'll give you 10 minutes. How do they pull that one off?
Well, look, I mean, it's again, it depends on how you think about 9/11 and all that lot. How could they pull that off if it was a conspiracy thing? But as I say, the only way that you'll ever get the world together is by having something like that. And you see it in films, or they're bringing aliens in more and more and more that they do exist, and the conspiracy theories go around. And that's the trouble with conspiracy theories. It's us lot who make them because we're trying to work out what the hell's going on. So we'll put things in place in our heads that are possibilities. I don't know. Who knows?
Correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't really watch films and TV and stuff. But is there an alien movie that isn't where it isn't framed as aliens being a threat? Is there any alien movies where they come down and they help us out and they advance our civilization, or are they all framed under, you know, aliens are coming here to take over the world, we got to fight them?
E.T.'s the last one I can remember.
That one I have seen. I can't really remember it.
The only friendly alien I can remember. I may be wrong. There must be something out there, I'm sure. But in general, the whole thing is a threat. It's always a threat.
Yeah, I
Well,
agree.
what was the one with Keanu Reeves in? Which was a remake of an old 60s film, I think. Oh, with the robot.
Oh,
Oh,
something of the earth, something. Yeah, but I mean, they were even coming to destroy Earth because they thought we were all weirdos and
were they?
like we were too violent. And then
Okay.
in the end, the alien was persuaded that actually we have got nice things in our communities like
Yeah.
love and all
Yeah.
that lot, and so they spared us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point, Camel, though, isn't it? Everything is like attack, 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 attack.
And maybe that's just good cinema, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe they want everyone to think that there's no possible way they could be friendly.
Mm. Yeah, that's very true. Anyway, we'll move on from the alien bit. Right, get back to the economic deep state. Um, do you see Camel with your 13 family thing that you mentioned? I can't. What do you call it?
The Council of 13.
Council of 13. Um, Kamazabi, amongst all these questions, wanted our views on the royal family, which might tie into this Council of 13. Because I think you mentioned was it the Windsors before or the Spencers or something?
There's loads of them in there. The
I'm
Rothschilds,
not sure.
Bilderbergs.
Yeah. Do you two see that the royal family have any part to play anymore, or are they part of some sort of bigger picture that was convenient?
Can I go first? Because I
Yeah.
don't have much to say about this.
Cool.
Then
Of course you
Cobra
can.
can
Yeah.
go. I don't know much about the Royals. In fact, embarrassingly enough, I was in a live stream a few months back and somebody said, "What's happening with Kate Middleton?" And I had to ask the wife who Kate Middleton was.
Ooh.
So yeah, I don't know. I don't know is the answer. I don't pay any attention, but I do think that you can find all of them photographed on Epstein's Island, and that's all I really know. So I'll hand it over to Cobra from there.
All right. Well, I think for this country, I don't know about the families being involved with the royal family. I don't think that is so much a case. I think in this country in itself, the Queen was in power for so long that she was established within Great Britain, and a lot of people I loved the royal family or hated the royal family, but had an opinion. And I think where she's passed away, King Charles has come in. No one really has any views on him. No one really cares about him, I don't think, as much as they did with the Queen. Now, unfortunately, he has cancer, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone at all. So we don't know how long he's going to be in power. And then we're moving on to William. Now, when you look at the younger generation, a lot of the younger generation have an affinity to William, and they did to Harry as well, because they did things that were the youth could associate with to a certain extent, especially with Harry and taking a bit of puff here and there and all that sort of stuff. But I don't know how useful or needed the royal family is now in the eyes of the actual country. Worldwide, we've come out of the Commonwealth. The countries are sort of separated from there. We still have a Commonwealth, but this is all stuff that was established many decades ago and is a sort of dying type of thing, really. So what's the role of the royal family now that the Queen has gone? I don't see it really being that much. I think the Queen was very powerful and well respected across the world. I don't know so much if King Charles is, and I don't know within our own country whether it's something that people are really bothered about. There'll always be royalists. There'll always be people who support it. But is that number going down? I think so.
Okay, cool. I will sort of try and bring in, because this link with politics and deep state thing, but isn't it part of not that I'm an expert at all, isn't it part of government legislation, and whenever they come up with new rules or laws, it has to go through the ruling king or queen, obviously, or if there's a new prime minister elected, the king now obviously has to approve it in this ritual way with the sword
Yeah,
thing
but
and all that. What's all that about? I mean,
yeah,
isn't that part of the deep state possibly?
no, because it's a formality. It's a ritual, as you said, and it's something that's been done all the way through the monarchy, just to really show that the monarchy was the head of the country. And so, realistically, does the prime minister or does our parliament need the royal family? No. Yes, every time it has to be agreed by the king now or the queen before who the new prime minister was. They'd have to go and meet them, and any major policies have to be approved, or not even approved, but pass through the royal family and all that sort of stuff. But it's not a necessity. It's more as I say, a ritual, or not a ritual. That sounds more demonic or something, but more a thing where it's tradition. Let's say it's tradition to do it. It's the way it's been done. It's the way it will be done. So I don't think there's any value to that as such.
Camel, do you see that at all?
Something I've noticed is whenever something shows up that they typically don't want getting out, they seem to release a story about some of the royals, and everyone seems to get distracted. And I've often noticed that and thought to myself, well, they're distracting everyone with this, but they don't know that the UK pension funds just got margin called, right? So I've often noticed that as a pattern. Is there any use for them? I don't know. I don't really feel qualified because I don't know what they do. But then if I was the king, And this was my heritage. Would I just decide to lay it all down and say, no, 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 I don't want to be king anymore? Like, probably not. So I can't really blame them for, if you're born into that life and you're the royals, you're probably going to stay being the royals, right? That kind of makes sense to me. But I don't really think they are required, but I also couldn't see them leaving. Like I said, would you lay down the sword? Would you lay down the crown if you were born into it? Like, it just is what it is, right? It's just one of those things that's probably not going anywhere. That's my thoughts anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. It's not something that's just going to end or anything like that. I think if public demand for them or public opinion about them went to a very, very, very low sort of thing, maybe it could change. But I don't see it changing anytime soon. It's been with us, and really for Britain, it's something we hold dear, and it has given us something different from the rest of the world. There are kings and queens in other countries, but they're not as strong as our monarchy from Britain. So, yeah, I think it's still strong there, and for our country, it doesn't do us any harm, and it does bring a lot of tourism in.
Yeah.
So there's loads of benefits to it as well. But yeah, it is what it is, really.
I've got an interesting fact, semi related, but did you know the city of London, that 1 mile square,
Yeah,
right? That's where all the banks are. But did
right.
you know it's an international territory?
I didn't know it was international. I knew that it was governed itself.
Right, so get this. The city of London, this square mile where all the banks are, they have their own police system, the City of London Police, because
Yeah,
they're not governed by the same rules as the rest of the UK. And it's the banks that vote as well, rather than have this whole democratic election system. And interestingly enough, even the king or queen, whoever is in the throne at the time, is not allowed in without requesting permission because it's an
wow.
international territory. And almost no one knows this. And I've been waiting for the perfect opportunity to get this fact out. It's been trying to burst out on me like an alien for a while. So
I don't think a lot of people know of the actual City of London anyway, as in it is a totally separate entity to the rest of the country.
yeah, it completely
Um,
is. It's an international territory. Apparently, it's not
yeah,
the only one. There's a few others around the world that are similar, but they set these international territories up, and even though it is perceived by everyone that lives here that it's part of the UK, it's actually not part of the UK. It doesn't have to conform to any of the laws. It has its own laws, its own police system, its own government system, its own voting system, and therefore they can funnel the money in from the rest of the world, and it technically counts as an international territory. So
so wouldn't it be interesting to find out which other ones there are and see if there's any correlation
I think the
to
Vatican.
maybe the families or anything like that? That
The Vatican is one for sure,
yes, yes,
and I want to say Washington, but or there's definitely one in America. I'll Google
yeah.
it.
I know the
Come back to
Vatican
me
is
on
its
that.
own country in itself because I saw the border when I was out there recently, and you could step over the border at the Vatican, and officially you were in a different land.
Yeah,
So very interesting. Yeah,
yeah, it's weird. It's weird the way they set these things up.
maybe worth looking into that a bit more about where all of them are.
I wish I could remember. Definitely the Vatican is one. I'm sure there's one like DC or Washington, something like that, which also counts as an international territory within America. It's not considered part of America. Um, Definitely the Vatican is, and like I said, definitely the City of London is as well. There's
I
probably a
bet.
few of them. Yeah, it'd be worth
Key
looking into.
places. I bet they'll all be key places in the world.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm, there's something for you.
Some
Well, you get,
homework for the listeners.
Yeah.
yeah, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because we say about the deep state, and yet through those thoughts and conversations, when you start, I don't know, listening to information like that, then why does that exist?
Yeah.
Why would you want it to exist? You know, there's obviously a reason. Why would you
Absolutely.
have a square mile that happens to be the biggest, richest banking square mile probably in the world? Totally has complete different jurisdiction over the rest.
As far as I'm aware, the history of it is, at least for the City of London, that there was a bunch of rich people in London many, many years ago. And then we saw an influx into the area of perceived poor people or lower class people. And the agreement was they would set up this square mile and put the banks in there and say, this is the city of London. All of the farmers and the lower class people are not allowed in the city of London. And there was an agreement that they could stay outside, and then they would put all the banks inside. And I believe that's how the square mile was set up. And then I guess it just evolved from there.
Mm. I might look into that. Maybe I'll bring it up in another one of our podcasts.
I wish I could remember all the details. I did a huge deep dive. There's a couple of documentaries on it in YouTube, and it's pretty fascinating. So yeah, definitely, I'm going to go and brush up on those for sure.
Yeah,
talk about it in the next episode.
Mm.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating, and it's really strange that all these things, to me, all these things exist, and most people don't really know anything about it, and yet it just it still continues to exist, continues to do its thing, and there's lots of distraction out there for us peasants to not bother looking at it. But it seems like nowadays, and one of the greatest things about discussions like this is it's starting to come back into the forefront of people's minds, and I think that's healthy to a degree.
Yeah, definitely. If it brings awareness, even like now, myself and Camel are both saying, well, we'll go off now and have a look into that, because I'd like to look into that and find out more. I didn't realize that there were other places in the world, apart from now that you mentioned it, the Vatican. And so are they linked in some way? Are they controlled by the families? Is there, there's so many things.
I bet if you look into it, there's one of each of those Council of 13 families behind.
I actually thought exactly that.
Yeah.
That's why I want to know where each place is.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I'm loving this Council of 13 thing. I've got to work it back up to Lucifer as well at some point.
Oh, no.
Yes, it's good fun. Right, okay. Getting back to the main topic, the economic deep state. Now, we sort of got a bit of an idea that probably exists. Now, looking at this year, obviously you've got the elections going on in the US, which we'll come to in a minute. We've got the same happening in the UK. And do you think that there was any significance with bringing the election forward in the UK?
I think there was. I think in general, people know, or the people higher up know that we're heading for a recession. I think if you waited too long and we hit a recession and then you went into an election, then the ruling party, Conservative at the moment, would have absolutely no chance, because all the blame will be put on them for that, which probably is the case. And so by moving it forward, it's like, look, this is the best time of any, or best of the worst times to have an election. I don't think Conservatives are in a very strong position anyway. And I think it's better to do it now than to do it later on when things may be really rough.
For me, I have a couple of thoughts on this, right? The first thought is, well, I mean, I should make this clear first, actually. I'm completely apolitical. I don't follow any of it. I couldn't tell you anything about it. But I did find the timing of it spurious when cross-referenced with my market analysis, right? My market analysis says that we're not that far from a top, weeks to months away from a top, and potentially then a recession. And I found it curious that all of a sudden they want to pull the election forward. And it made me wonder, and again, I don't know about the parties. I don't know anything about politics. I don't pay any attention to it. But it did make me wonder if what we're going to see is maybe a change of government and then a recession.
Yeah.
It made me wonder if
it
made me wonder if they're going to pull this thing forward because they can see what I can see, which is that a recession is not too far away, and they want to maybe swap the government over. Maybe Labour comes in and then they go, big, global recession, deflationary bust, all of that stuff, and then the Conservatives can put their hands up and go, see, it was all Labour's fault, right? And
Yeah.
the funny thing is, it's only really the traders and the financially literate that will be able to look at that objectively and say, well, it's not Labour's fault, right? But the rest of the country will run around going, oh, Labour, they done us real good, didn't they? They really shafted us, all of this. That's what most people will do. So I couldn't help but notice the timing of it seemed spurious. It seemed to overlap with my expectations that we would be seeing a major top come in and a recession in the not too distant future. So I wonder if it's that. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's a part of some other plan that I'm unaware of. But yeah, the timing did seem spurious for sure.
I think you're exactly right on that. I think there's so many little signals going on at the moment about an up and coming recession, and I think that is absolutely one of them. That move it forward while we're still reasonably okay, because we're in a lot of pain anyway, but reasonably okay, and then hit a recession. Interest rates go down, inflation goes up, everything goes peak tong, and whoever's in power then is in trouble. Yeah.
I got an interesting fact I'll slip in here for the people that like the occult stuff, right? If you look at government as instead of leaders and whatever else, and instead look at it as a pseudo parent, then there's an interesting pattern that you can play and an interesting game. You can play this with people, right? Think of the most politically
Camel.
Yeah.
Can you just explain what you just said? That word, pseudo what?
What did I say?
Pseudo penem or something?
Oh, pseudo parental.
Oh,
So
right.
a false parent. That is what the government serves to do
right, okay.
on an occult level. They serve to step in and be the parent that you never had as a child.
Okay.
So anyway, this is the observation you can make. Think of the most politically charged or politically motivated person right? And what you'll find is an interesting little subtlety. If you find, for example, you've got a friend who is super like, oh, the Tories, we need the Tories, and they're bowing down and worshipping to the Tories. Well, the Conservative represents the father figure in this occult system. So 99 times out of 100, if you find someone that worships and bows down to the Tories, what you'll notice is they have daddy issues, unresolved daddy trauma. Right, or an absent father figure. And what you'll also find is if you've got someone that's hyper like anti-Tory and, oh no, we need Labour. Well, that stands as the pseudo parent for the mother's side. That's the nurturing side. And what you'll find is the people that bow down and worship and are hyper passionate about Labour are actually have unresolved trauma from their mother's side growing up. Right. So armed with this knowledge, you can now go away and do this as an experiment. Think about the people that are the most involved in politics. Think about the people that are the most like people that are willing to start fights with their family and friends over the Tories or the Labour, right? And what you'll notice is in most of those cases, it's because they either have unresolved trauma from their father's or their mother's side, depending on whether they worship the Tories, which is the pseudo father, or the Labour, which is the pseudo mother. But for people that don't have that unresolved trauma, they tend to not care at all about politics, or they certainly at least they might have their opinions, but they won't be willing to start a punch up at a family Sunday roast over a political discussion. So yeah, now you've got that bit of information, have a think about it. And for me, at least, I notice it works every time.
I love it. I love that response.
Look, I mean, I'll tell you why I sort of don't know if I agree with that as such, right? I mean, it may be, in a way, yes, I can understand where you're coming from, because Labour is all for the helping of everyone and, at the cost of the country, like put all your money in and give it to everyone. Let immigration go to pot, do everything wrong. But anyway, you'll say I've got father issues now.
No. You'd have father issues if you were bowing down and worshipping the Tories. That would be the thing.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. I don't really respect the Labour at all. I have no respect for them at all.
But do you respect the Tories?
Yeah, I do. In some ways, I think all government, any government, right, is corrupt in their own way, and I think that they're all, putting it bluntly, full of shit, right?
Yeah, 100%.
But in saying that, if I compared Conservative to Labour, I would vote Conservative every time. If that was the only two ways I could go and I had to vote, I would go Conservative every time, because I think they tend to lean more towards capitalism, and Labour leans more towards socialism. And socialism to me doesn't work, but capitalism does give opportunity to people who want to work. And so therefore I have that sort of way of leaning, whereas Labour will be quite happy for everyone to be claiming benefits and no, we must help everyone, and just makes a lazy country, really. And then taxes the rich extortionately and gets the rich to move to other countries, which to me doesn't make any sense at all. Now, when I was younger, I definitely supported Labour more. I had no understanding, really, and it was just Labour's the way to go. But as I've grown and I've developed and I've created my little empire, yeah, I lean more conservative than I do Labour, for sure.
Yeah, but let me be clear about this. I'm not saying that if you lean one way or the other, that means you've got unresolved childhood trauma. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is,
if you're extreme.
yeah, if you're usually if you find somebody that's at the extreme that bows down and worships and has this whole like, we need the Labour Party to save us, or we need only the Tories can save me, right? That's this whole childhood like unresolved trauma. You can lean one way or the other based on your financial circumstances, based on your beliefs, based on whatever, right? And that's absolutely fine. That is not the same as what I was saying. What I was saying is, if you look to the extremes, what you will find is the people that are ready to start a punch up with their family at Sunday roast, right? Yeah. Typically, depending on which way they vote, you can tell that which one of their parents upset them as a child. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I get it.
It's interesting because it's that masculine, feminine thing come back into the conversation again.
100%, yeah.
It's really interesting because it rears its head in all sorts of different things, isn't it?
Yep.
I like that. Yep. We've got from Camel, and from Cobra we've got I like that. Okay, so that's really cool. So we've got all sorts of interesting, fascinating things sort of happening around the British politics in the election this year. America, what are your thoughts on what's going on in America? Similar type thing? And also just bring in it's what's this thing going on with Trump getting convicted? What are your views on that?
I don't know about Trump getting... Yeah, I was going to say I don't know about Trump getting convicted, so I'll let Cobra take that one. But in terms of the American election, I have 2 points to make here. One, from my perspective, that last election was the most rigged election ever. Okay, that's from my perspective. Number 2, it seemed to me like the powers that be, and what I really mean by that is the mainstream media, were leaving a deliberate breadcrumb trail. They could have easily, in my humble opinion, rigged the election, assuming they did rig it, and just moved on with it. But instead, they seem to deliberately do a sloppy job, present that sloppy job on the mainstream media and various other places. And it made me wonder the whole time. I was like, they're rigging this election, but they're also doing it in a way that can allow people like me to watch them rig it so that I can then go to my wife and be like, look at the way they're rigging this, right? Like, that was really weird to me. That was super weird to me. And I kind of took it as a sign of almost like they were doing it in plain sight just to let the people that were willing to accept it be able to accept it and be able to understand how the game is played. That was very much my vibe the whole way through. Like I said, I'm pretty sure they rigged that election. And even if they didn't, I'm pretty sure they wanted us to think they did, right? Or at least wanted some level, some amount of the population to be able to think they did. Like I said, they seem to leave a breadcrumb trail. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, at least, they did rig that election, and they did so in plain sight so that people with eyes to see could see that they rigged it. I've personally been a person that never believed elections work. I think they're all two sides of the same coin, and they're ultimately all WEF puppets, as I said earlier. So that's my thoughts on that. As for Trump getting arrested, I don't know. So I'll hand it over to Cobra.
All right, well, the big thing with Trump is, look, he's not, because he's his own man, he's his own businessman, he's made a fortune out of it, and is well established and very popular in many ways. They don't like him. He can't be controlled by anyone. And that's what they don't like about Trump. Now, I think Trump has got some issues as well. If I was to say that he was a narcissist, I think everyone would probably agree to some extent on that one. So I don't know how much it was rigged on the last one, but I do know that Trump obviously made a big hoo-ha about it, including what happened on January 7th. I think he was complicit to that. But on the other hand, Trump compared to Biden, for a start, let's look at it. Biden is not in control of his senses anymore. The guy's suffering with dementia. He can't string a sentence together. He can't even walk up a flight of stairs. How he is being put in a position to run a country and be the head of that country is an absolute joke. Now, that meant that we have a running now of Biden and Trump. Now, the powers that be don't want Trump back in power because they can't control him. They cannot control what he says, and they can't control what policies he makes. Now, this case that he has just been found guilty for was actually brought up just after his presidency ended on the last 4 years ago, roughly. And it was actually pushed aside and left alone. And now that he went in for the running again, they brought it up. Now, the actual case is centered around him being with a stripper or whatever 20 odd years ago and basically paying her off to keep quiet, right? Hush money. But you can't officially use hush money to hide something in the run up to an election. Now, the problem is that actual hush money was paid before he even announced that he was going to be in the running for this presidency. So that was the first error that was made. Secondly, he was put into a state to be ruled upon, which was highly democratic and totally against the Republicans. Therefore, you already had a jury, which you can never say a jury like that is not going to be influenced by such a powerful person one way or another, in favor of or against. They're going to be. That worked against him. And then there were so many things that if anyone else had gone to court for the same reason, would not have gone this far, which the whole thing has been a farce to keep him out. But actually what it's done is reverse it. His points have gone up. People know and they can see that it's a farce. And therefore, his popularity has actually gone up. And I've actually changed some of my thinking towards Trump. I do not agree with a lot of what he says. And I think he's messed up in a lot of ways. But in the same way, they've actually damaged the court system in America now by doing what they've done. They've shown that if you want to put someone away or you want to convict them to be a felon, you can do it just because you want to do it, not because there's actually really a case against them. So it's a complicated one. But I think I still to this day do not understand why they could not find one other candidate to be the Democrat leader. And they kept Biden in for another one because it's a joke. There's no way he can be elected again.
So, thank you for that. What would you say then, Cobra, when you say they're scared of Trump? Who's they?
Well, a lot of the major companies, banks, and all that lot, the very influential, the pharmacy side of it, and all that lot, they would often put massive donations into the campaign. And so they would gain favor with a person that was going to go into the presidency. So many, many donations are given into these things. And those people who put those massive donations in are massive companies who want favor and they want the president to make rulings and all that lot, which will benefit them. But Trump can't be bought like that. And that's the problem. That's where the problem comes in. He cannot be bought because he's his own man. He's a billionaire himself.
Or got anything to add on that, Camel?
Well, I'll say this. Biden is probably the best example of the government not being in charge, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's no way that guy is in charge. I think that's pretty obvious. I'll say this as well, for anyone that wants to do some homework, search for Biden's earlobe change, which sounds kind of crazy, right? But there's basically two types of earlobes and they're attached and detached. And if you look up Biden's earlobes, they changed from being one to the other at some point. So there's some homework for you there. There's this whole idea that he might not even be the original Biden. I'm not saying I believe that, but if you go searching for the earlobe thing, you'll probably find what I'm talking about. But like I said, the weird thing about this is, you know, we're talking about government being in control or whatever else, and there's no better candidate for a puppet than that guy,
Yeah.
right? Like he doesn't, and part of this goes back to that breadcrumb trail thing I was saying, right? Like they must be deliberately leaving a breadcrumb trail. I'm sure that's what they're doing. I'm sure they're slowly but surely trying to point out to people that actually the governments aren't in control because they
Why?
can't, huh?
Why?
Because I think
Why
they
would
need.
they do that? The powers that be, let's say, why would they do that? Wouldn't that cause eruptions all over the place?
Yeah, it would, and I think that's partly what they want. I mean, you're familiar with my work. I think they want increased violence over the next set. Well, I've been saying July, August. That's when I expect it to start. I think they
Yeah.
want civil unrest, and I'm not entirely sure what they're hoping to bring in off the back of it, but I think they want civil unrest. I think they want people to get tired with this system. We're seeing the same thing with the whole C-19 era. More and more. I mean, they could have walked away scot-free and the damage is done, but we're seeing more and more of these sort of things be pushed on the mainstream. Like maybe that whole thing was a scam. Maybe there was some corruption in there, and they could easily walk away from it. And the people that know, and the people that don't want to know, they don't know at the moment. But it seems to me like everyone is going to be forced awake in the next few
I
years.
can understand where you're coming from with that, actually.
Yeah, they seem
They
to be.
want unrest, no
They
doubt,
do.
because if you
Yeah.
want to change a system, you've got to break the system that's in force at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And it seems to be that way. And like I said, you know, if you're going to install a puppet, that's one thing. But when you install a puppet that can't read off a teleprompter and is facing the wrong way during national anthems and is falling over when he's walking up a flight of stairs and all of this kind of thing, like it just, to me, it speaks to they're sending a message. They're trying to signal to people that things are about to change dramatically, I think.
Interesting point. Very interesting.
When you say, Camel, just picking on that, when you say they're sending a message that things are going to change, who's they? Who's the
I think it goes
message
back to that whole Council of 13
Okay, cool. So back to
central
the deep
banks
state.
and
Yeah.
all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think what this is leading up to is, and I've been saying this for a while, I think they're going to force even the people that are hiding from the truth. I think they're going to be forced to accept the truth over the next 4 years. And I think the reason for that is they need people to be able to make a decision, and that decision has to be an informed decision. So I think they're going to force even the people that are hiding their head in the sand, they're going to force feed them the truth. And then once everyone has the truth and there's no escaping the truth, then there's probably going to be some decisions to make, right? Like you're going to be forced to just make a choice. Are you going to be worshipping this or worshipping that? That's kind of how I see it. And but I do think they first have to force everyone awake. They first have to make sure everyone, no one can have plausible deniability for this next step. I think this next step is everyone's got to be woken up. Everyone's got to be force fed the truth. And then once no one will have the ability to hide from the truth at that point. And then when the next decisions come with the CBDCs and everything else, everyone's going to have to choose which side they're on.
That makes a lot of sense. I actually agree with that. I think I was wondering where you were coming from with that side that they're leaving breadcrumbs, but it actually makes sense. As I say, you've got to break a system to start a new system, and when you show the system to be totally falling down and totally breaking down, then you can bring in something new, and it's something we've sort of discussed before.
Yeah, and like I said, I think it all comes down to that informed decision. If you've got a good chunk of the population that's still brainwashed from the last 4 years and they're still hiding their head in the sand and go, no, I don't want to believe the government hates us and I don't want to believe this and that and the other, then they've got this plausible deniability. But I think that's the next step, to wake everyone up. Everyone is force fed the truth. Everyone has to be on the same page. And then from there, some decisions will need to be made, right? Are you going to accept this new beast system? Are you going to accept these CBDCs, or are you going to be willing to stand up and fight against that?
That kind of makes a ton of sense. That I was just sitting there thinking, because with obviously there's so much more information out there. People, if you want to, you can get so much information, and the truth is coming out about so much stuff, isn't it? And sorry. No, go on.
I was just going to say that's exactly the point. The truth is coming out, and it doesn't need to. This is the thing, because the people that are awake, The people that have been able to see this, whether you saw this immediately, like the moment the pandemic went live, whether you saw that immediately and were like, this is a scamdemic, or whether you had to work your way through it, do your own research, come to your own conclusions, and eventually come to the realization that this is all really a move for control and power and tyranny, or whether you just saw it right from the beginning. There's still a whole heap of the population that are completely brainwashed. They're still living in this fear state. They still completely bow down and worship before the government. They still have no idea that the government actually doesn't have their best interest at hearts. And I think that's where it's going. I think, first of all, like I said, we've got to wake everyone up, get everyone on the same wavelength, and they could easily walk away. This is the key point. If they walked away now, they've gotten away with it, right? The people that know, and the people that don't want to know, they don't know. So there's no reason to keep fighting this, to keep bringing this to light. They could easily walk away and everyone can go back to their lives. And like I said, the people that know, and the people that don't want to know, they're never going to wake up. But it seems to me like they are orchestrating a mass awakening. And I think that's all part of their game plan. I think, like I said, they need to wake everyone up, make sure everyone's on the same wavelength, and then they can all be forced to make an informed decision, and no one will have plausible deniability.
Yeah, that makes sense. This is exactly what I was thinking there while you was chatting. To do that, which would say to me logically that obviously the powers to be, the deep state or whatever we want to call them, know this is happening. They can't get out of it, and so they're constructing a way of getting out. And that would make sense. Yeah, get everyone online, wake them all up, with the view to whatever they're trying to plan, the carrot at some point. Here we go down the line. It makes so much sense logically. If you was going to be really sinister or want to continue your power trip that you've done for centuries, then they're not stupid, are they? They're really not.
No, and that's the thing. They've got so much power and so much occulted knowledge and so much. I mean, that occulted knowledge is ultimately the highest level psychology ever, right? They can control the entire psychology of masses amounts of people, hundreds of millions of people. And, they have within their powers, within their grasps, the ability to install a puppet that isn't leaving a breadcrumb trail, that the world isn't laughing at. They could have just as easily installed someone that could read off the teleprompter and not fall over every 5 minutes. And but they're not doing that. They're doing this on purpose. They're doing this on purpose because they want people to know.
Yeah.
Where do you think the election will go then in November? Do you think it will be Trump or Biden?
Funny you should ask me that. A long time ago, when Trump was still president, I had this idea that I was bouncing off of my wife, and the idea was that they would prop this thing up and then hand it over to Trump and crash the economy so they could say, yeah, there you go, it's all Trump's fault. That was like a wildly speculative idea whilst Trump was still in power. And now it seems to be coming full circle. And now it's almost looking like right as we're about to go to this big global recession and deflationary bust, they're thinking about putting Trump back in. And I just wonder if that's what they're going to do. Like, it goes back to the UK election thing as well, right? Are they going to have a change of government and then a big recession so they can go, well, it wasn't our fault? It makes me wonder if that's the case.
Yeah, I think Trump will come into power.
I do too.
Biden.
Yeah, I do too.
Coming into power again, it would just be absolutely ridiculous anyway. But yeah, I mean, then again, if you're starting from rock bottom, if he gets into power in November, and we've hit a recession before that, and he's starting at rock bottom, then the only way he can go is up in the same token. So any improvement is an improvement that he will claim, and he will claim it. Yep. And I do think that a recession is imminent. And I'll tell you why. Have you noticed what Warren Buffett's been doing?
Building cash like never before.
Absolutely. He has sold off masses of his stocks in Apple and all that lot, and he is building cash. And every time there has been a bust, when a bubble burst, that's exactly what he had done every time, and he's doing it again now.
Yep.
So I think a recession is imminent. Will it be before November? Even if it is just after November, he's already in power then, and then the only way is up.
Yeah, the writing's on the walls when you look at the central bank interest rates, right? Yeah. Like we've seen Sweden, we've seen Switzerland. We've then seen places like Czech Republic, all cut rates. Then just recently we saw Denmark, Canada, and then the ECB cut rates. And typically what you see, what you don't see is divergence. You don't see a bunch of central banks cutting rates and then a couple of others holding them steady or hiking them. What you tend to see is a few of them go first and the rest follow later in life. So all that's really left, as far as I can tell, is the Bank of England, which will probably not cut until July, and then the Fed. And typically speaking, once we get the Fed and the Bank of England cut as well, the top's coming in within the next 1 to 2 months. That's typically what we see. So the writing's on the wall. The fact that the only two central banks left to cut is the Bank of England and the Fed, we may well see that as early as July. It could be later. It could be September. Maybe they're going to be late to react, right? They were late to react on the way up, and maybe they're going to be late to react on the way down. But that doesn't necessarily mean that
they can. I don't think they can hold out till September.
No, I don't either. Like, as you know, my expectation has been July, August. It's not a very popular idea, but then again, when I look, like I said, we've seen Canada, Denmark, the ECB, they're all cutting rates, and the ECB even cited they're cutting rates because of financially stressed conditions of holding the interest rates where they are. So the writing is on the wall, and it's probably not going to be that far away, to be honest. At the same time, we got unemployment spiking, right? Something else you always see as a precursor to recessions. And I know we had one recent piece of data come out, but at the same time, that data, albeit the non-farm payrolls looking positive, they have a history out of the last 13 or 14 prints. They've revised at least 11 or 12 of them down quietly 2 weeks later. So is it therefore reasonable to expect in a couple of weeks that we see a quiet downward revision and then the real data comes out? Seems reasonable to me. Meanwhile, that SAM recession rule was 19 states as of last week. It's now flashed in 20, which also pertains to the unemployment level. So it's probably, I mean, the thing is, nobody wants an up only stock market more than me, right? Like I make my living by buying the dips in the uptrend. So if we're going to keep going up forever, then my life is really easy. My business is really easy. Everything's fine. I don't want a deflationary bust in a recession, but the writing is on the wall. Like I said, with the interest rates, with everything else, the unemployment, if CPI comes in cold in the next, what is it, Wednesday, we're getting the US CPI print. If that comes in lower than expected, then again, the writing is on the wall.
For sure.
Fascinating. So really, from our conversation so far, I would say there's lots of things going on in the background that is all part of the game. Very quickly, before we move on to the last, I can't believe we've been on an hour already. It's gone so quick. Very quickly, how is this affecting? This is more to Camel, because Camel's been doing it for a long time. Have you ever seen, from an investing point of view, of what you do for a living, have you ever seen a period of time that is this normal, or would you say, in your experience, is this even harder to try and negotiate what's going on and trying to position yourself properly?
Yeah, it's definitely. This is definitely a harder time to be a trader and an investor, for sure. We are at the end of a 42-year cycle that goes back to 82. We're also putting in non-stop blow-off tops across the board. We've got Nvidia going completely parabolic, and we've got gold breaking out at the same time. We've got dollar strength at the same time. We've got the stock market ripping higher at the same time. Bitcoin's at all-time highs or close to. So yeah, this is not an easy environment to navigate by any stretch of the imagination. I really hope to be invalidated, like I said, because it would be way easier to deal with if we've got another year and a half plus of bull market ahead of us. But it's just not what I'm seeing, unfortunately. And like I said, no one wants to be invalidated more than I do. But it is what it is. So it's a really difficult time to navigate. And if I am right and we do get this recession, this global recession, this big deflationary bust, then times are going to get really, really hard. And especially for investors and for traders, there's going to be opportunities, as always. But, the reality is the majority of market participants are going to get really scorched by this. And that's just the way recessions are.
Yeah, definitely. And I presume that's why you're probably seeing that massive fluctuation for you, Cobra, which can probably be quite frustrating sometimes.
Oh, very frustrating. I mean, it's day to day. literally, I mean, as I say, gold and silver is my main thing, and my knowledge isn't as massive as Camel with all the stocks and everything else. But even just with gold and silver, especially gold, we don't see movements like this in gold. So we've always turned around and said, yeah, silver's the volatile one, etc., etc. But gold is absolutely volatile at the moment. We're talking drops and rises of 30-40 pound in a day. And it was just the other day, Friday, just before my auction. It was at a high rate when it started, and it just dropped 30 pound odd. And by the time the auction went live, we were on 1,800 odd, maybe dropping just slightly under. Well, to try and navigate that when you're buying gold at a certain rate and within a day it's dropping by 30 pounds is impossible. You just can't do it.
Frustrating times.
Very.
Times. Cool. Right, that's cool. I think hopefully I've pretty much got through directly Kamazabi's questions there, other than the very last one, which I haven't asked you guys. Is there, are you hearing much talk about war this side of the pond?
Well, with Russia and Putin and all that lot, he declared the other day, or said that he would use nuclear weapons. And a lot of people are saying, yeah, he won't. There's absolutely no chance he's going to do that. But you know what? He's one of the people that actually, there is a potential for that to happen. I think even he would have to think very, very hard about that, because if you let one of them go, it could start a chain reaction which would destroy a majority of the world. In the same token, can you imagine if he let one go and the rest of the world went, look, we can't retaliate to this because, it will destroy a majority of the world. So we're at a very tense time, but we've seen that in the 80s before. We were looking at nuclear war and all that sort of stuff in the 80s. I remember it as a kid. It was massive. And we got through that. I don't know. It's war. We're already seeing wars breaking out all over the place. The Palestine-Israel situation is really bad. And the Arab states are getting involved in one side or another. I think it's a very complicated situation out there at the moment. I think China is a massive threat to America, and who knows when they would jump into a situation. They are doing things at the moment which are very, very weird. They're buying a lot of farmland around military bases in America, and they have been for some time. Now, if you tried to do the same in China and buy farmland out there, say from America, you wouldn't be able to. But the Chinese are buying a lot of farmland around military bases in America. So there's a lot of situations going on which are very tense at the moment, and I think it's a very fragile world we're living in right now.
I have a completely opposing view, which is that there's no World War III. There's none. There's no world wars. There is going to be localized pockets of civil unrest. I'm sure about that. There is going to be state-sponsored localized pockets of terrorism. I'm sure about that. And I'm sure that begins July, August. And I'm sure during the Olympics, we're going to see some madness as well. But generally speaking, I don't think World War III is even at all a threat. And I've kind of built somewhat of a small reputation for myself for being very dismissive of all of this on Twitter. And oftentimes we see small escalations, drone strikes in this place or that place, and then my Twitter blows up and everyone's like, Camel, see, told you you're arrogant, like World War III is coming next. And then within hours the thing subsides, and I'm in the camp of people that says World War III is not in their game plan. You can take my word for that. I give you my word for that. There's going to be no World War III. I give you my word for that. It's not in the playbook. And yeah, so live in a fear state all you want, worry about war all you want. That's entirely your prerogative. But for me personally, I don't care. I don't care. And if I'm wrong, and there does seem to be a herd of people out there that want to see World War III just so they can say I told you so. But if I'm wrong, we've got bigger problems. We honestly have bigger problems. So I choose to just be completely sort of dismissive of this whole thing. And it rubs a lot of people up the wrong way. And I know that a lot of people like to say, yeah, well, World War III. But I can think back my entire life. There was always a time when allegedly World War III was about to break out any minute. 9/11, World War III, right? Every 6 months, there's some conflict somewhere. And World War III, bro, gotta be. But no, it's not in their playbook. You have my word. There is no World War III, so I don't think we have to worry about nukes or any of that stuff at all.
Well, as I say, look, I don't. It's not something I want to see, and it's not something I want, to say. Oh, yeah, look, Camel, I was right, you were wrong. By no means, none at all. But I don't want to be totally dismissive of what's going on in the world either. And yes, I have lived through several times when, it's been said, yeah, we're at the brink of war and all the rest of it in a major way. And yes, this is another time, and I agree with you to that extent. But I wouldn't dismiss it totally. And you say you can take my word for it, but do you or I or CPM know what is in the playbook? Do you know what I mean? Do we really know?
I am 100% sure there's no World War III. And
I hope you're right.
I give everyone listening my word. And I know my word may not mean anything to you, and that's fine. But I give you my word. I am 100% sure there is no World War III. There is nothing even close to that. That's not what's in the playbook over the next few years.
I hope so. I wouldn't like to see that at all. And I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, my opinion is not that there is going to be a World War III. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, like what he turned around and said, that he's willing to use them. And many people have said that before. Pakistan has said it before. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, there's just a lot going on. And I think we are in a delicate time at the moment, is what I'm saying.
I 100% agree with you that we are in a delicate time. I 100% agree. But I can't get away from the fact I'm so dismissive of large scale escalations, because that's not what's on my radar. What's on my radar is, like I said, localized pockets of disruption, unrest, and state sponsored terrorism.
Interesting. Very interesting indeed. Guys, before we move on to a really fascinating subject for the last part of today's podcast, a very quick question. If you could, in your day-to-day across a week, outside of your just general socializing, whatever you do, how, as a percentage of all the things we talk about and listen to, and discuss, how many times is that brought up in day-to-day when you're intermingling with anyone outside of this? Is it high, low? People talk about these sort of things?
In my case, there is only a couple of people who I can have these sort of discussions with. And that's because they're open to what's going on. Whereas I think the majority of people, like we said before, are living day to day, living their lives and trying to survive and do their things. And so in general, no, the points don't come up, or the conversations don't come up that often. I think when I deal with a few of my friends who are of a bit more, I don't want to say intelligence, because I'm not saying other people aren't intelligent. I'm saying a bit more open to these things, or look into these things more, I can have deep discussions about it. But they're not just day to day walking around, have a chat with someone and say it. Some of the political matters do come up now and again, but otherwise, yeah, very few people I can talk to on this level.
Same for me. I don't really notice anyone that seems to be paying attention, apart from the people that have been paying attention the whole time. So certain members of my family are very switched on and they're fully aware. But yeah, I generally speaking, I don't see much change.
Interesting. So it's a low percentage.
What about yourself on that one, CPM?
Mate, I think other than the general people fed up, but that's just a general fed up, and blaming, normal government day-to-day sort of stuff that we've always done over the last 40, 50, 60 years. No, hardly anyone. I mean, I was talking to someone the other day and he didn't even know what a CBDC was. Not a clue. Didn't know what was it. He just looked at me as though I was like a clown. Like, what are you going on about? What are you going on about? So, it is what it is. But that's what it's like now. But that gets back to, it's quite interesting that, and the reason why I said it is because you was talking about it earlier about the waking up of society, and how it's going to take a little bit longer. Than it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's got, there's a high percentage of people that are still sort of running around on that hamster mill, waiting for the magic wand to change their lives. And it's interesting, and I think that percentage is very low, very, very low. Early days. That's the way I look at it. Right, okay, guys, thank you. That was brilliant. I think I've got through all of those sort of theories, but keeping still with the theory of the economic deep state in the background, I'm going to bring in AI. And the reason why I'm going to bring in AI is that I couldn't believe, Camel, your theme that you've got on your running on your channel, and it's so lifelike. And I was like gobsmacked when you said, yeah, it was AI produced. And so I was going to ask a question. With AI seeming to be a thing and it's not going away, do you think that it's going to become more and more used from a economic deep state point of view, as a rule, going forward in this deceptive way that, but in a more technical, deceptive way than what we've been used to in the past? Do you think it's going to be used that way? What's the threat?
I think the issue is we can't actually comprehend what it's going to be like.
Yeah.
That's what I think is the real issue. And I had kind of a penny drop moment or a light bulb moment after this song was made. So one of my subscribers, Sheepherder, shout out Sheepherder, gave me an email and said, "Oh, I know a bunch of people have been making you AI images, but here's an AI song." And so I was like, okay, let's see what this is. And then I was smiling the whole way through. I was I was like, why is it actually good? Right? Like, why is it actually I couldn't even tell it was AI at first. It took me a little while. And so then I posted it to the YouTube channel. I'm like, look how cool this is. Someone made me an AI song. And the comments, largely speaking, are people like, yeah, I like this song. Oh, great song, whatever. But I noticed anyone that was a musician in the comments was straight up hating on this. So they were so quick to be like, "Oh, it's so obviously AI, bro. Like, oh, as a musician, like this is horrible, like whatever." And I just thought, as an objective observer, like it was listenable, it worked. Sheepherder fed this thing some prompts and it spat out a whole song in seconds based on the things I say on my YouTube channel. So initially I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool, right? But then I decided to try out the AI thing for myself. And so I was feeding it prompts and I was playing around with it. And suddenly I was like, wow, this thing is actually like, I have friends that are producers. And I was suddenly like, wow, I can make songs just like they can. And I haven't got 15 or 10 to 15 years experience like they do. And I was thinking to myself, this is crazy. So this then leads me down a rabbit hole. I start going on YouTube and looking at music producers, and their entire YouTube channel is them producing music. And I find a few of them that are playing around with this AI. And the real penny drop moment or the light bulb moment for me was when I was watching these producers that have been producing music for 10, 15 years. All of a sudden, they're playing around with this AI, and you could see it in their eyes. They were like, oh, we are screwed, right? And this was what was so fascinating for me. You could see them, they were like giving it prompts, and at first it was a joke, and then all of a sudden it would produce something that was as good, if not better, than what they could produce. And you could literally watch them go, oh man, we're fucked. We're fucked. Right. And in this moment, I realized, I was like, wow. So I've heard many, many people talking about AI over the past few years, and I've heard people say seemingly insane things like unemployment is going to reach 50% because AI is going to come in. And I've always been quite dismissive of this until I started to play around with the AI for the music. And then I realized I've within 20 seconds can produce a song completely tailored, completely personalized with whatever lyrics. You can get ChatGPT to write you lyrics and a strong song structure. And the whole thing, I'm like, this is crazy because I haven't been involved in AI at all, but I have some friends that use ChatGPT. For example, I have a friend who is a computer coder, right? And he will write code and then it will do whatever it's supposed to do. But the whole thing with writing computer code is the less amount of code you use, the more energetically efficient it is. So the cleanest possible code has the fewest lines of code. And what he was telling me is he can type in all this code and he prints this, 1,000 lines of code that builds whatever it's supposed to build. And then they copy and paste it into Chat GPT and they say, fix the bugs. right? Whereas before, they would have had to spend ages going through every single line, inspecting every detail to try to find the bug. Now they just copy and paste it into ChatGPT. Not only does it find the bugs in less than 20 seconds, but it will rewrite the code. It can reduce 1,000 lines of code to maybe 30 or 40, making it pristine code, right? Because the fewer lines you have, the more energetically efficient it is. And that is the gold standard for computer code. So even programmers now are, instead of finding their own bugs and writing their own perfect code, they just write whatever they want to write, copy and paste it into ChatGPT, and it spits out like the most pristine, perfect computer code you've ever seen in your life. And it does it all in 20 seconds. And all of this led me down this rabbit hole of thinking, I've heard people say unemployment's going to spike because AI is going to replace them. And the whole time I've been dismissive of it. I'm like, yeah, well, in my mind, I was picturing it like iRobot. I'm like, there's no way iRobot's going to be walking around and, stacking shelves and all of this stuff, replacing people. But then you realize on a more fundamental level that just having a free AI system, I mean, I have a friend that does his taxes, and instead of using an accountant, he uses ChatGPT, right? I know another person that's been using it instead of a lawyer. He's getting free legal advice from ChatGPT. And this sounds insane, but this is the level we're on now. And so not only have you got artists being like, oh, we shouldn't allow this stuff. Now we've got musicians saying like, oh no, this shouldn't be allowed. It's not the same as real music. Well, the fact is, it is, right? The fact is, when you listen to this music, it sounds just as good as any music that anyone ever wrote or whatever. And then on top of that, like I say, you've got lawyers being replaced by a free software. You've got programmers. That was the gold standard, right? If you could code computer programming language, whatever your language is, Python, C++, whatever, if you're one of those people, that was a really high value job. But now somebody like me who doesn't know any of those languages can just go into ChatGPT and say, hey, bro, write me a code for this, and it will spit it out in seconds. So I don't think we're really ready for how much this thing can replace so many jobs out there. And I was speaking to my wife, who was a nurse, about this, and I was thinking, well, nurses, all right, they're okay. But then you realize after a while that human error is so sloppy, right? There's so much there's so much error in any kind of human job that even high level surgeries these days are being replaced by AI robots. And it makes me wonder if we're not really prepared to deal with the level of replacement that we could see from AI. And I hear people, like I said, I hear people saying this kind of thing, and I've always been very dismissive of it. But until I started to listen to the music and then see on YouTube music producers that have been producing for over 10 years, suddenly you could see it in their eyes. They were like, oh, we're fucked. And suddenly then I realized, I was like, man, this thing is, no one is ready for this. No one is ready. No one can comprehend just how quickly it will replace people. You think about in any corporate structure, how many project managers and middle managers there are whose job really all it is to chase emails around and say, hey, have you done this work? Okay, good. I'll take that off my checklist. And it makes me wonder if, fast forward to 6-7 years in the future, are we going to see unemployment just through the roof because AI can do most people's non-skilled jobs? Not only that, we've even got supermarkets like Ocado and Amazon, for example, that runs entire warehouses based on robots and AI. And it really makes me wonder if it gave me a new perspective on UBI. I've always looked at universal basic income as, oh, it's a tyranny control system, right? Like, oh, they want everyone to be dependent on the government so that the government can fully control you and, tell you whether or not you can eat meat this week and whether or not you have to conform to something, and then you can have your UBI. But suddenly it put this whole thing in a new light for me. Suddenly I was like, wow, if unemployment actually goes to 50% because AI can replace most jobs, then people will need a UBI because they won't have any skills. They won't have any possible way to make money. And then all of a sudden it reframes this whole UBI concept for me as, suddenly, instead of it being a tyranny type ordeal, suddenly I was looking at this like, maybe people actually need a UBI because AI is just going to be able to replace most people's non-skilled jobs. So it was a really weird idea for me, but as soon as you start to use this AI, you realize how insanely good it is. And the human brain is just not equipped to imagine or foresee what it will look like in a few years' time. I heard Elon Musk say that within the next 12 to 24 months, we will reach a point where we've got AI that is smarter than any one human. And within 4 to 5 years, we should be at a point where we've got an AI that is now smarter than all of humanity as a collective. And that includes the fact that all our scientists have access to the internet and can use computers, right? So we might only be a few years away from reaching that point. And that is insane if you really think about it.
Well, this is, I mean, this is a massive, massive subject. And I was looking at this quite closely about a year ago, and I was talking to CPM about it at the time. And there's a lot of fear from right at the top of people who are working with AI and designing AI and improving it. There's a lot of fear that it is accelerating at an exponential rate. It is non-stop accelerating and getting more intelligent and more of a risk. Now, AI can work two ways. It can either destroy humanity or it can be highly beneficial to humanity. But on a short term, you're absolutely right. It will take a lot of jobs. And I said this, as I say, a while ago, that the UBI system and all that, like 80% of jobs, they were talking, 80% of today's jobs will be lost. And then there will be jobs created due to AI as well. So your 50% figure is probably around right. But they're talking about that being within the next 2 years. It's accelerating at such a rate. The only other thing to really be wary of as well, and as you say, it's designers, artists, musicians, and all that is just one side of it. You touched on lawyers. Even in security, we are seeing AI being used where humans were used, and that sort of constricts that market as well. But there are so many places where it can be used. You're looking at driverless cars, driverless trucks. Well, that takes out how many jobs? Do you know what I mean? From cabbies to truck drivers to transport to all sorts of stuff. And this will just increase and increase and increase. Well, that's one side of it. But the other side of it is how intelligent AI gets. And do we restrict how intelligent it can get, or do we allow it full flow? If we allow it full flow, there are some real dangers to the human race in itself. So we've got to be very careful how we allow it to develop, and how intelligent we allow it to become, and whether it becomes sentient. And that's where the other key is. Now, there are videos out there saying that we already have had sentience in AI. I'm not so sure that we're quite there yet, but I don't think we're that far off. So there's a lot of dangers to AI as well as a lot of benefits. And your UBI comment is absolutely right. I said it at the time that UBI is also another reason why they're developing it, is because there is going to be high amounts of unemployment. So totally agree with a lot of what you're saying. And it is scary, but exciting at the same time. We saw it in the Industrial Revolution. We saw it even with mobile phones and how that changed a lot of things. And this is probably put them together, and every single Industrial Revolution, Iron Age and everything, put it all together and then accelerate our species by that amount. It's mad.
Yeah, it is indeed mad.
So do you think that there could become a time where our reality is so far beyond their own comprehension? And when I say that, our reality is that's what we're consuming with our eyes and ears, because most of the way the tech world's going, everyone's on their phones and whatever. Do you think that that's going to become more and more and more, listening to what Camel was saying about, the music side of it? Do you think it's just going to become more and more and more, and we're going to get a total shift in how we perceive things?
Well, many people are living in a slight virtual reality world already, whether you live through Facebook, Instagram, virtual reality goggles, all the rest of it. Smart glasses are out now. Excuse me. And so our whole way of living is changing, even to the point where Facebook, or Meta as it's called now, was developing a meta world. So you could buy property within the meta world, and Adidas was doing it. And you can sell products through the meta world. So you'd put your virtual reality glasses on. You'd never leave the house to go shopping and all that lot. And you'd go in your virtual reality world to the Adidas shop. And you'd own a house in the virtual reality world, and you'd own land, and it would have actual monetary value. You'd go down to the Adidas shop, you'd look at the clothes there, you'd try them on in the mirror, all virtual reality. If you liked it, you bought it, and it will be delivered to your house. Look at Amazon, or like you said, Camel, Amazon using using AI at the moment, and then they're using drones. They've started using in some states drones to deliver the packages. So that cuts out all that. So our whole world and our whole perception will change. And then the other side of it is you look at how people portray themselves on the computers. They're not even portraying, you could have some geezer sitting there in his pajamas all day long, and in the virtual reality world, he's made his figure up to be a really good looking strong man and all the rest of it. You don't know what you're looking at. You don't know what information is real or not anymore. And it is going to get very complicated.
Camel?
It certainly is going to get very, very complicated. And I think the most worrying part for me, at least, is that, like I said, the human brain is just not designed to be able to comprehend what this is going to look like in a few years. So, we can all sort of speculate, but the reality is all of our speculations are probably going to fall significantly short of what we actually end up seeing. So yeah, it's going to be crazy. It's going to be crazy, but it certainly gave me a insider perspective, having played around with the music AI, and also seeing the reactions of musicians to that. Musicians were, you could see they're worried, and rightfully so, because they've worked their whole life, and now somebody like me can just type in a prompt and generate music. So I don't know. It's a really weird one. Like I said, it gave me a new insight on UBI, because suddenly I instead of thinking of UBI as tyrannical, I started to think of it as almost a necessity. But again, it's really difficult because we just don't know how. If I said to you, tell me what it looks like in 6 years, right? There's no way you're going to be able to tell me. No one can, right? Our brains just can't comprehend how fast this thing is going to evolve. So it's a wild time to be alive.
Oh, and by the way, I think that song was absolutely brilliant. I love it. I absolutely love
it. Yeah, that's the thing, right? It's actually good. It's actually good. It's crazy.
Yeah, you need to make me one.
I will do.
Cool.
Cool. Is there anything else you want to talk about with AI?
Not necessarily.
What's your worst fear?
My worst fear is that we're just not ready for it. We just can't comprehend how many people it's going to make redundant. I think that's my worst fear.
So quickly.
My worst fear is how far it will develop and whether it can become sentient. Because if that happens, I think we're in a world of pain.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You know, one of the biggest things, what I love about sitting listening to you two, and this whole journey of mine is how we are really logically, when you sit there and you start to put the pieces of puzzle together, and logically you can just see we're sitting on the precipice? Yeah, right on the edge of such a massive change to what we've all been used to, and I think for people that are probably in their like 30s, 40s, that have had half their life one way, and then all of a sudden, possibly they might get the rest of their life in a totally different concept. Whereas I've had sort of pretty much 60 years of roughly being the same sort of consistent way of living on that hamster wheel. And obviously the youngsters are going to have go through a massive change, and probably only a couple of generations through, grandchildren are going to be totally living in a different world, aren't they? It's really fascinating. It is a wild. I think, Camel, your thing is a wild time to be alive, just to observe what's going on. It's crazy, absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Indeed.
sure.
And
Sorry,
again,
Camel, go on.
No, I was just saying, yeah, it is indeed a wild time to be alive. We're at the end of these multi-year cycles. We're at the end of these fiat currency cycles. And then we got the AI component, and at the same time, a seemingly tyrannical takeover via CBDCs and UBI and all that stuff. So yeah, it's absolutely wild. Absolutely wild.
okay. For the last sort of 15 minutes, with all that in mind, do you ever, or can you even like just put into words what you may think you will try to do to comprehend everything that's going on? Um, how you going to cope with that? Do you ever think about that? How do you cope with it, or do you just sit there and just like, yeah, what's going to be is going to be, and just going to make the best of it? Or how do you comprehend all these thoughts?
I think the first thing on that side is knowledge is power. So having knowledge or trying to gain knowledge about all these sort of things is the first step forward. Um, I don't think you can control a lot of what's going to happen, but maybe you can adjust certain things to make it easier on yourself if you have that knowledge. So again, like we've said many, many times, like we have, say, gold, silver, Bitcoin, those sort of things on the financial side, that's one thing. As far as jobs go, not so much maybe for you and me, CPM, we're a bit older now. But for the young uns, I think getting into AI and getting more knowledge in that would give you a better chance of having work or jobs in that sort of industry. So that's another way of doing that. But I think in general, having the knowledge, being aware of things and making it as best as you can is definitely a thing. There's not, you can't do everything about everything that's going on. I just think take care of your close friends and family and take care of yourself and work with the system, or not with the system, sorry, work with the way things are changing and developing to your best benefit. Really, what else can you do?
Yeah, I agree. I agree completely. I couldn't have said it better myself, to be honest. Yeah, I have nothing to add to that, to be honest. That's you said it perfectly.
Oh, don't give him that.
Why?
Don't give him
Bro,
that.
man.
It's true though. All you can do,
It
knowledge is
is very
power,
true.
right?
Yeah.
That is absolutely true.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power, and the more you know, the more you know. And at the same time, you got to take care of your family. You got to build a good support network around you, and you got to acknowledge that hard times are probably coming, right? So
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So that's we've got 10 minutes. So I'll what do you guys want to talk about? Do you want to ask anything or go on bit
I
for
think
free for
we've
all?
covered everything in a everything today. We've covered a wide variety of things,
Yeah.
and I think really these conversations are one beneficial to ourselves, the three of us, because we analyze things and we question each other about things, and I think that's massive. But I think out there for the listeners as well, take some of these subjects away, look at things, and maybe drop us in the comments a few of your thoughts, what you think about all this, what's going on, any questions that you want us to look into. And let's develop these conversations and keep learning and bringing it into the What podcast.
100%.
yeah, I agree. Go and look up Joe Biden's earlobes.
Cam, I've got to ask you something.
Yeah, go on.
You know, you start right at the beginning of this podcast, you were saying about you don't sleep very well.
Yeah,
And yeah, I think you've got a hyperactive mind.
yeah.
But when you start saying about you've been looking up about Joe Biden's earlobes, I'm not surprised you don't sleep, dude.
The thing is, Camel, I don't sleep, right? I really don't sleep. I have never looked up his earlobes. No.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do it and you'll be amazed. That's all I can say.
Okay. It might keep me up even more than I already am.
Yeah, I mean, not for the faint of heart. Let's say that.
Okay, I'm going to ask you both a question. Camel, what's your favorite conspiratorial thing to consume in your mind? What do you really love to really get into?
Conspiratorial.
Yeah, I hate call it conspiratorial, but
I wouldn't say
so
it's
the favorite
I wouldn't say
far
it's
out there.
conspiratorial, but I
Yeah.
would say natural law is something I would recommend everyone look up and live within.
Mhm.
When you
Cobra?
say natural law, what do you mean, bro?
Natural law is the natural spiritual law that governs the universe. It's essentially karmic law, and it's probably the most occulted piece of information, and it will change your life. I'll say that.
Okay.
Can you expand on that a little bit, Camel?
I can do, yeah.
Go on.
Essentially, there's a hidden spiritual law which functions like karma, and it all comes down to theft. So things, all human rights can be violated via theft. So if you lie, for example, that is theft of somebody's right to freedom of information and accurate reality. It's not just as simple as theft is stealing someone's property, but there is this natural law that occurs. It's like a karmic law, and if you study this and you understand how it is and you can live within it, it's essentially a strong form of morality. But once you do that, you stop suffering negative repercussions, and then you can build the things in your world that you want to build. So I would say that anyone that studies natural law will be able to suddenly realize that a bunch of things they were doing in their day-to-day life violates natural law. And once you stop violating natural law, you can build the reality that you want.
The Secret.
The Secret is kind of more like a law of attraction thing, right?
Mm. Yeah, law of attraction. Yeah, you put it out there, it comes to you.
Yeah.
But
So
you see, the thing is, I think the way that works is more that it's teaching you to think positively and, you know, put in your mind what you want. And what actually happens is, if you think positively, things around you are positive, because they basically, you're manifesting positivity because you ignore negativity. Whereas if you look at negative things and you're always looking at negative things, then your whole mind is negative and therefore your life becomes negative. So
yeah,
that's the way I look at The Secret. That, look, it's not really, oh yeah, I'm going to put out there that I want £1 million, and then, you know, suddenly £1 million turns up for you. That's not what it is. The point is, if you set yourself goals and you are positive in your aims to those goals, you will achieve those goals.
yeah, energy flows where intention goes, right?
Yeah.
So what you put your attention and intention on will
Exactly.
present in your conditions and circumstances. But you do have to operate within this natural law. This natural law is like gravity, right? Whether you believe in gravity or not, whether you think gravity is fair or not, if you jump off of a cliff, you will fall to the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And natural law is exactly the same thing. It's a spiritual law that operates within the confines of our reality. And if you consistently violate natural law, then you will suffer karmic retribution for that. And thus, all that manifesting and trying to live a good life that you try to do, trying to bring the things that you want into your existence, will not have any level of success because you'll constantly be being beaten down by the karmic repercussions of you violating this natural law. So I would highly recommend people look into that. That's certainly the key. Once you live inside of natural law, then you avoid negative karma, and then you can indeed build the things you want. Intention and intention is very important as well. What you put your intention and attention on will indeed present as conditions and circumstances in your reality. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say, really.
Are you that sounds a very deep subject, correct?
Yeah, I mean, depends how you define deep, but yeah.
I love your conversations. I really do. It's like that little carrot conversation. You're very much like me.
I'll say this really quickly,
It's
right?
really fun. Yeah, go on.
Do you ever notice how the powers that be, right, the Council of 13, whoever it is that we were talking about earlier, do you ever notice how they operate in plain sight?
Yep.
Right, they have to do that because otherwise they are subject to natural law violations, right? So they have to tell you what they're going to do. Otherwise, they will suffer karmic retribution. And this is the entire occult structure. So, for example, if I say, hey, CPM, drink this drink, and I have poisoned that drink, but I don't tell you, I just say, hey, CPM, drink this, and you drink it and you get poisoned and you get sick or die or whatever. Well, now I have to suffer the repercussions of that. But if I say, hey, CPM, here's a drink, but by the way, I put poison in it, and then you choose to drink it anyway, well, now all of a sudden, according to natural law, that's on you. And so it doesn't matter if we think this is fair. It doesn't matter if we think this is just. None of that matters. What matters is
natural law is natural law, just like gravity is gravity. If I tell you I've poisoned a drink and I give it to you and tell you it's poisoned and you drink it anyway, well, there's no repercussions of that because you made an informed decision. And this is why the powers that be operate in plain sight. They have to tell everyone what they're doing ahead of time. They have to present it on a stage so that we can see it. Otherwise, they will suffer natural law. So they will suffer the karmic retributions of natural law. So there's a huge take home here in that there's a reason they operate in plain sight, and they have to do so because they have this understanding of natural law. So the sooner you understand natural law, the sooner you can operate within it. The sooner you operate within it, the sooner you are free to live a karma-free life.
I'm very dubious on it, and maybe this will be a conversation for another podcast. And the reason I am is because how many times do you hear of criminals and all that lot living a great lavish life after doing crime, and then people go, crime don't pay, but in a lot of circumstances crime does pay. Not saying that I want to do crime, that's not my thing at all. But my point is that I don't necessarily see, I don't believe in karma. I don't believe in karma. I've seen people do nasty stuff and have no punishment right throughout their lives. And I've seen people be good and decent and honorable and everything and get hammered on again and again and again. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know, bro.
I would make the argument there that the people that are criminals, you just haven't seen the karma that they've received. And similarly, the people that are perceived as good, you haven't seen the things that they have done to violate natural law in the meantime. Again, it's kind of like gravity. It doesn't matter what we think of it. It is a law of this universe. It is a law of this realm. So,
well, no, I mean, gravity has been proven scientifically, unless you're a flat earther and don't believe in gravity because of that, that's a different subject. But gravity is a proven thing, and we know how it works. We can measure it. We know why it works.
Okay, then let me ask you this, Cobra. I know you're a moral guy. I know you operate within a strong moral framework.
Yes.
Why? Why, if it doesn't matter?
It's not that it doesn't matter. That's me. That is my my sort of views, my thing, that I will be decent and proper to everyone I encounter. So it's not whether it matters or not. It matters to me and no one else.
And do you honestly think if you started to be an immoral person that nothing would happen? No, there would be no consequence of that.
Well, I mean, there's a consequence if you get caught for doing something immoral, like you could go to prison or you could get done by the law or anything like that. But I don't believe that, you know, let's say, and I'm not going to do this, right? Let's say tomorrow I'm out there and I don't like someone and I stab him to death and he's dead, right? And no one finds out about it. Then no, I don't think nature is going to punish me.
Okay.
No, well, I don't.
Respectfully, I completely disagree. And I think
absolutely, bro. And we all have our own rights to views and opinions. Absolutely, brother. But
respectfully, respectfully, I disagree. And I think if you stab someone, even if you get away with it and don't end up going to jail, there will be a significant consequence for that. And I believe this is the #1 most occulted rule.
But it's the evidence. Where's the evidence for that? Like, there's evidence for gravity. Like, you compared it to gravity, there's evidence. Where's the evidence for this, bro? That's a belief. It's like a religion. You can either believe or not believe in a religion.
I guess you can. I guess you can. Right. I guess you can. But yeah, I would encourage people to look into it because it really is a thing. It really is a law of this universe. And it's
interesting,
one of the most...
and I will look into it, definitely. I don't dismiss things, but at the moment I just have no evidence towards that at all.
No, but do look into it. I mean, if you look
absolutely.
And then afterwards you disagree, that's fine.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
This is, in my opinion, this is the #1 most occulted rule. This is the most hidden rule, and this is why they have to operate in plain sight. This is why
rules are made by people. So who's made that rule?
What rule?
Well, the rule of karma, let's say.
No, it's a universal rule. It was.
Oh, like okay,
like made by the creator of the universe, right? It's
and again, we come to what you believe in.
Yeah, we do, because you don't have to believe that the universe was created. You can believe it was a big bang or an accident or whatever else. But this is how I see it, and this is how I believe the elite see it as well.
Yeah.
There you go, CPM. Hope you're happy,
dude.
We could make a mad podcast just on that subject,
mate. Now, I'm fascinated by that last 10 minutes. Absolutely fascinated by it. And how versed are you in this, Camel?
How versed? I mean, I've spent countless hours, hundreds, maybe close to 1,000 hours of looking into this stuff. But
Over time?
over time,
Yeah.
what do you mean? Like how many years?
Yeah.
4, 5, maybe.
Okay, cool. So you seems like you're quite versed. That's what I'm getting
Yeah, but
to.
I mean, I guess like with any of this stuff, you can always choose to accept it, or you can choose to reject it, or
100%.
whatever. And I think it's an individual thing, and that's fine.
Absolutely.
Some people will look at this and go, "Nah, I don't believe that," and that's fine. Other
Mm.
people will
Yeah.
look into it, and I think a lot of it depends on your personal circumstances, right? Like if for example, you study natural law and you think, oh, maybe that's true, and you make some changes in your life, then suddenly you see massive benefit, then you'll be more likely to believe it as fact. Versus if you study natural law and you think, oh, that's BS, and you don't make any changes, then maybe you're more likely to be like, well, it is indeed BS, right? So a lot of it is personal circumstances. I think the same is true of religion or God in general.
Yep.
Some people are open to seeing God or open to having a creator. And I think if you're open to that, you will receive experiences that kind of back that up. And if you do indeed receive these experiences, you'll be absolutely convinced that there is a creator. Versus if you're kind of shut off to that, or maybe you're open to it and you just don't see any evidence, then maybe you can happily reject that. And that's an individual thing, right? Like everyone gets to have their own experience and their own beliefs, and it is what it is. But I would say if you study natural law, I'll say this: my experience was I studied natural law, I made a few changes in my life, and suddenly everything got massively, massively improved. Now, whether that was coincidence, who knows? But I don't think it was. I think it was a direct result of understanding natural law and living from within it.
I think I agree with what you're saying to a certain extent. I believe, like I've always said, I respect all religions, and I respect everyone's right to believe in whatever they want to believe in, and I have the same right to believe in what I believe in. And I think I looked into theology and all that lot for quite some time when I was younger, because I was brought up in a family which was religious, and I couldn't understand it or whatever, and I looked into it deeply then. And I think the basis is the same. So you look at it as natural law, for instance, and it has improved your life. I have morals just from myself, as in I don't need a religion for that or whatever. I have those good morals and way of life. And that may also fit in with what you're saying with natural law. And therefore it's my positivity and my morals have affected the way my life has gone, from a young age being very different to an older age now. So yeah, I mean, look, as I say, I will never disrespect anyone else's views, and everyone has a right to their views. And I may have different ones, but I do believe that a podcast between us guys on religion, natural law, atheism, and belief in general power of the universe, or energy in the universe, would be a great podcast.
Yep, I agree completely.
Wow, I think I might have my work cut out if I try to orchestrate that one. Do you know? And that's really cool that you brought that up, because that was my leading questions that I was having with Camel, and obviously because I know you quite well as well, Cobra, and that was going to be my next thing. Then perhaps we could dedicate a podcast, because I find this.
I'd love to.
I find this fascinating, absolutely fascinating, because for me it brings up deeper things than just the words that we're saying, because there's a lot of deep emotional content that gets disrupted through the energy of those sort of conversations. And from an observer's point of view, it's fascinating to see how those emotions work through that thought process and conversation. So I would love that a lot.
I would definitely. Let us know in the comments, guys. Would you like a podcast on religion, theology, atheism, natural world laws, all that sort of stuff? I think it would be great.
Yeah, I do too.
Would you like to do that, Camel, Cobra?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then perhaps we'll set one across, because I think that could even produce a bit of a series, to be fair. because it's deep. It's deep.
Oh, very.
It's a very deep, deep conversation, which I would love to listen to you to talk about. I really would. I've just really struggled myself not to get involved, but hey ho. Right, guys, that's 2 hours, believe it or not.
Brilliant.
Thank you
Time
very
flies.
much. Thank you very much indeed. As always, these podcasty type things that I'm doing now, we used to, are brilliant. They go too quickly, and I'm getting some great feedback. I believe you guys are probably getting some good feedback too.
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to expanding the whole channel and dedicating it. And this is why I call it W.O.T, you know, way out there. Because it sounds a bit wacky, but it's conversation that normally we shy away from. But I think it's healthy conversation, especially going into the times we're going into. So thank you both. Loved it. Is there anything you want to say to promote whatever you're doing? Go for it. Cobra, if you want to go for it.
Yeah, guys, you can find me on YouTube under Cobra Stacker. That's my channel. And there are videos on there relating to gold and silver. And then every Friday, I go live at 7 p.m. with an auction where I sell gold and silver. You do not have to buy. Come along, have a laugh, and see some amazing, amazing pieces.
I'll just say, yeah, do what Cobra says. Go to Cobra Stacker's channel, become a member, have a look at his auctions, because honestly, he has everything from, if you're like me, I'm personally the type of buyer that likes to get the best price relative to spot. So if you're like that, Cobra will be able to hook you up with some relatively cheap gold and silver. And if you're a collector at the other end of that spectrum, right? If you like the highly difficult to find, the highly rare, exquisite pieces, then he'll be able to hook you up with that as well, and everything in between. So yeah, head over to Cobra Stacker's channel, check out his auctions. You will certainly be able to find everything, like I said, from cheap relative to spot, if you're like me and just like to stack, versus, or I should say, all the way up to the more highly collectible pieces. So yeah, that's all I'll really say about that. Thank you for having me, CPM. I appreciate it. Thanks, Cobra. I had a blast, and looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, definitely.
It's going to be amazing. Thank you very much, guys. Take good care. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.